Now, taking the second unit of environmental studies further, let us today have a look into the basics of the concept of ecological succession. The learning outcomes will include basic understanding of the concept of ecological succession, definition of the same, and more importantly, we will be looking into some terms and concepts which are related to ecological succession. Now, before we proceed further, let us recall as to what our ecological community exactly is. We know that individuals of one particular species occupy a particular area for a particular period of time, and that is known as a population. And populations of different species combine together to form what is known as a community. Now, these communities, they are never stable but dynamic, and they change more or less regularly over time and space. So succession basically is the natural change. Mind it is not the unnatural change. It is the natural change in the structure and composition of a community in time. Having said that, suppose we have an area, and in this area it is totally bare. There are no animals, no plants out there, and it gets colonized by a ecological community. Say the first community which comes and colonizes the area is known as pioneer community. With time, it changes into maybe a second community, a third community comes in, a fourth community comes in, and finally a community comes in which stabilizes with the prevailing environmental conditions of the area, and for a long period of time at least it is not going to change into any other community. Such a community, the final community, is known as the climax community. What changes during the course is the structure of the community and the composition of the species. Now, as and when the plant communities will change, it is but natural to expect that the animal communities are also going to change along with. Generally, ecological succession refers to changes which occurs within the time scale of 500 to 1000 years. The term succession was first used by Hult in the year 1885. It is also called by some as the process of ecosystem development. Now, definition: the process of an orderly and progressive replacement of one community by another until relatively stable community called climax community occupies the area is called ecosystem development or ecological succession. So this is the definition given by Odum, and this is what we have just discussed in the earlier slide. That is, in an orderly manner, in a progressive manner, one community is going to replace another community at the same place over a period of time, and that process is called ecological succession or the process of ecosystem development. Now, what succession is not? Now, succession does not include regular seasonal changes in plant communities or the regular changes that may be due to predictable climatic events. Say, for example, if there is an annual rain in the desert, there will be a sudden growth of vegetation. Now, such changes are not included under the process of succession, which occur on an annual basis, on an annual cycle. Secondly, it also does not include extremely long-term change associated with geological changes or long-term climate change. To make it more simple, say the change in vegetation which has taken place from the time when dinosaurs ruled the planet Earth to the change of vegetation that we find today, such extreme long-term events of change of vegetation is not included under the process of succession. Now, succession is not always unidirectional. So the changes may be reversed by the alteration of an environmental factor. Say, depending upon the level of flooding as to how much water is there, a swamp may turn into lake. If more water is there, swamp may turn into a lake, and when the water recedes, the lakes may again turn into swamps. Now, terms and concepts related to succession. There are two basic: series and stage. Now, series is the series of plant communities that follow one another in ecological succession. Fine. So we have one community replacing the other community. That those communities are known as serial stages. And what is a stage? Stage is the floristically or structurally distinctive segment of a series. Fine. So within the series, with different series which are coming one after the other. So one series may be floristically or structurally distinctive from the third community or from the fourth community, that is known as a stage. Now, types of successional community, three communities are there. Say in succession, the first community which comes and establishes itself over a bare area, that is known as pioneer community. The final community which stabilizes with the prevailing environmental conditions, that is called the climax community. And all the communities which come in between the pioneer and the climax community are known as the serial or transitional communities. Succession in different environments. Succession which takes place in aquatic environment, example ponds, lakes, streams or swamps, that is known as hydrarch succession, and the different serial stages are known as hydroseries. Succession which starts in an area where adequate moisture is present is known as mesarch succession. Succession taking place in dry habitat such as dry deserts, rocks, etc. is known as xerarch succession, and the different serial stages are known as xeroseries. Now it is of three types. If it takes place on rocks, it is known as lithoseries. If it takes place on sand, it is called Zamosiri, and if it takes place on saline water or soil, it is called Halosiri. Now, primary and secondary succession. Ecological succession, when it starts on bare uncolonized ground, that is, there is no vegetation, no animals, fine, and the ecological starts from zero, then the succession is called primary succession, and the serial stages involved in primary succession are called pre-series. Now, ecological succession is called secondary when it takes place in an area from where inhabited communities have been removed. Suppose in Kaziranga we have grasslands and the grasslands are burnt, so the grasses have been burnt but the soil is there, and again the succession starts. That is known as secondary succession, and the serial stages are called subseries. Autogenic versus allogenic succession. Succession takes place when the prevailing environmental conditions get altered. If the environmental conditions are altered by the organisms themselves, then the resulting succession is called autogenic, whereas if external factors such as climate, leaching of soil nutrients, increase in salt concentration of the soil, deposition of salt or sand, periodic fires, floods, etc., that is environmental conditions, they bring about the change because of which succession takes place, then such succession is called allogenic succession. Thank you so much. You may mail your feedback at ras.manideep@gmail.com.